Tell you what, you guys are you're an orderly bunch. You sat down right away. That's pretty good. I like it. So welcome to the joint summer meetings. Thank you for joining us this morning. Before we get started, I just want to mention a couple things. There are certificate of participation sheets out on the registration desk that Julie will have for you Water Resource District members to satisfy your statutory training requirement. You can fill those out. She'll sign them as a witness and then file them away and get them registered. So please do that sometime this morning. If you are going to the Medora Musical and the Pitchfork Fondue, there are tickets that should be in your name tag packet. Please do not lose those. I don't want to tell you what happens if you lose them. I think it's not good. I don't know. You might be sitting in the bus all night. So with that, we're going to start out. Jack Dwyer and Dani Quissell are going to give us a legislative update. Jack is with the North Dakota Water Resource Districts Association, and Dani is with the North Dakota Water Users Association. Jack Dwyer joined Dwyer Law Office in November of 2011 and opened an office in Fargo. Jack added several areas of law to the Dwyer Law Office's repertoire. He serves his clients in areas of water, business, commercial, real estate, probate, estate planning, and general litigation. Jack graduated from Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota in 2004 with a degree in accounting. Graduated from the University of North Dakota Law School in 2009 with distinction. He is licensed in North Dakota and Minnesota. He has a passion for his family, baseball, and the outdoors, and he loves North Dakota like we all do. Dani serves as the Executive Vice President of the North Dakota Water Users Association. She has a decade of experience in lobbying and policy development. Prior to her time in North Dakota, she served as a Director of Public Policy for the South Dakota Farm Bureau and Director of Policy and Communications for the South Dakota Department of Agriculture. In addition to her experience at the state level, Dani served Senator John Thune's legislative staff in Washington, D.C. She and her family live on an acreage just out of New Salem, and I know they have many, many animals to take care of. So thank you, Jack and Dani. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. So we're just here to talk about the session. 2023, we had a very busy session for water, and I hope you all agree that it was mostly successful. Want to thank everybody from the water users and the water resource districts who helped us out with testifying and contacting legislator. I know we reached out a lot and recruited a lot of our grassroots stakeholders to do so. So, I guess we're going to tackle these bills one by one. We're going to move through them fairly quickly and provide just kind of a short discussion on each one of the bills, or most of the bills that impacted water, and then we'll provide a pause after each slide for questions about that bill. So, first of all, Senate Bill 2020. Water funding, Dani will be talking about that one.
Yeah, so Senate Bill 2020 is the appropriations bill for the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Commission. You have up on your screen the buckets, what they call them, of how they appropriate dollars from the Resources Trust Fund to the State Water Commission, and then it's from those buckets that project sponsors come before the commission to ask for funding for their particular projects. This is how it broke out as far as the buckets go, and then here's on a pie chart how that was laid out. And I'm going to talk just in particular for Water Resource District's interest about the flood control bucket, and that's the lower chart there, because within the flood control bucket, they did line item money for specific projects, including the Mouse River project, which received $76.1 million, the Lower Hart project at $12.3 million, and then other flood control was at 6.1, and conveyance was at 8. So within the flood control bucket, that's what's available for those particular projects. In addition to the money Senate Bill 2020 included some legislative direction, and that includes intent language to finish out the Mouse River project. So they did put intent language that they do intend to provide funding to finish that out over the next couple of bienniums. They also put intent language in there regarding the Missouri River. We had a lot of really good conversations with new appropriators and existing appropriators about the importance of utilizing the Missouri River. And so there is language in the bill directing the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Commission to support efforts to put the Missouri River to beneficial use for the state of North Dakota. So really appreciate everyone coming out and talking about projects and talking about important issues to the state from Water Resource District perspective. I know we had a really good conversation with appropriators about some innovative things folks are looking at in the Red River Valley, and had a particular project in mind that we pitched to appropriators. That did not end up in the final bill, but I think it was a really good conversation that we had with them, and definitely laid some groundwork for looking at what perhaps joint boards could do with watershed management, working together across county lines, leveraging some federal dollars. So I think we'll be building on that conversation into the future. And that's what I have on 2020.
Before I move it on, any questions for Dani? All right, I'll talk about Senate Bill 2036 briefly. Senate Bill 2036 was created, I should say drafted, during an interim water drainage committee. So the Water Drainage Committee introduced two bills, 2036 and 2037. I'll get to that one later, but 2036 with that one, so prior to the 2023 session, there were two sections of code that provided process for assessment projects for water resource districts, 61-21 and 61-16.1. 6121 was focused solely on assessment drains, where 6116.1 was for all assessment projects. So with this, and there were some discrepancies and some, they were very similar, but there were just some differences. And so what 2036 did mainly is combine those two chapters. So now we're left with just one assessment process. And so, it eliminated 61-21 and then, kind of picked the best of both for 61-16.1. There were some other substantive changes, but we don't have enough time to go through them. So, any questions before we move on to the next slide? All right, so we worked on two bills that focused on economic analysis. If you remember, economic analysis is required for any cost share application for flood control projects, with a few exceptions. And so 2037 was one of those bills that came out of the interim Water Drainage Committee. And what 2037, I guess, if it passed, it would have required water boards to conduct an economic analysis on a parcel-by-parcel basis for any assessment project. And then that economic analysis would cap the amount any water board could assess a landowner for a project. It was discussed at length. It was a pretty heated bill. There was a lot of, it was worked on quite a bit. And then, but it ended up failing by a pretty large margin. Senate Bill 2326 was a bill that would require the State Water Commission, the Department of Water Resources, to not require economic analysis be performed for projects less than $1 million. I think the statute that requires economic analysis was passed in 2017, if I recall correctly, and the limit or the statute requires economic analysis be performed for projects over 1 million. By way of its cost share policy, the State Water Commission lowered that threshold down to $200,000. And so there was an effort among some legislators to bring that threshold up to $1 million, up to the statutory threshold of 1 million. That it passed the Senate at 1 million. It was modified down to $500,000 by the House, and then it failed. And so I guess both of these bills that deal with economic analysis failed, even though we spent a lot of time of the session talking about economic analysis. All right, so 2372, we've probably had the most questions on, from water resource districts or water managers following the session on 2372. 2372, in its initial form, would require or would create new political subdivisions covering, every square acre of the state, called watershed districts, and they would function much like our joint boards do, and so that was amended in the Senate, and what the amendment did is, number one, well, I should back up. Water boards currently may form a joint board with neighboring counties, and it's that statute is permissive. What 2372 does is it requires joint board a county to participate in a joint board, and then it the second, or I should say section 3 of the bill also gives that joint board the ability to serve as an arbiter when a county will not participate in either a reassessment or a construction of a new project. And so this bill was intended to deal with the problem of having one county not participate. Most of the time, counties that are neighbors that have projects that span county lines, most of the time they work well together, sometimes they don't. And so this bill was intended to fix that problem. There is a question about whether or not a county has met its obligation under Section 1 by joining any joint board, or if they have to join a large basin board, like the Missouri River Joint Board or the Devil's Lake Joint Board, one of those large basin boards, or if one of those call them project-focused joint boards that might be between 2 or 3 counties, if joining one of those will satisfy that obligation. So, there's some questions on this bill, and we're going to have to work through those and probably work on this the next session because of the questions that exist. So. Talk about House Bill 1385. If you remember, in December of 2021, we had a tribal water panel, and one of the representatives from 3 affiliated tribes indicated that they were not eligible to apply for state water grants to the State Water Commission because of the authorizing legislation for State Water Commission. So we work with mostly the 3 affiliated tribes, but the other tribes as well, and 1385 adds tribal governments as the governments that can be funded directly by the State Water Commission. Any questions before I move on? Can I take this one?
So I'm going to talk about public notice now. There were a couple of bills brought before this session that dealt with public notice from water boards to constituents about the activities of the board. One bill ended up passing, that was House Bill 1391. So August 1st, there'll be a new requirement for all water boards to send draft minutes. I'm going to emphasize that, draft minutes from your meeting either to the newspaper in your local area for publication or post those draft minutes on your website within 10 days of the meeting. So you have a meeting, prepare your minutes. I would definitely mark those as draft, so it's very clear for everyone that they are draft. And then you either post them on, if the water board has a website, if the county has a website, you can post them there, or send them to the newspaper for publication. And those minutes just have to be sent to the newspaper within 10 days. I would, if you're going that route, I would highly recommend keeping some kind of documentation that you did send those, and then those will get published. And that's an additional way for folks to know what's happening at the water board level. We had a lot of conversation about this at the session and a lot of back and forth on what the right way was to notify folks. We talked about everything from having to release minutes 72 hours after a board meeting to individually serving every member in a water resource district with minutes. And this was the compromise that we came to with having that notification 10 days after the meeting with draft minutes, either on a website or posted in a newspaper. So that requirement will be effective August 1st. So likely at your next meeting, you'll have to make sure to have those draft minutes done and posted within 10 days. Have any questions about that requirement? Correct, they are draft.
So the problem that this was attempting to fix, appeals from a local governing body expire 30 days after the decision of the local governing body. So previously, a water board could make a decision, and of course their minutes wouldn't be published for probably 45 days, right? Because it would, or I don't even know if they were required at all, but if a water board makes a decision and it impacts a landowner or a citizen, and they have 30 days to appeal, but they don't know about it, I guess that was the problem that this was trying to solve. So just give I know it was one of those I guess Leon Malberg bills. Representative Schatz out of Dickinson introduced this one, both of the two previous bills that were on the screen, and Leon Malberg testified that they had missed their deadline to appeal a water board decision out of Sargent County because the decision was not published in anywhere until, say, so they didn't know about it at that 30-day deadline. So. Yep. So we were happy. We were happy that the initial bill was for publishing minutes within 72 hours. So that would be impossible, and that would also cost a lot of money. So we were happy that the House was willing to change that to allow either posting to a website or providing the minutes to the newspaper within 10 days. So that even over holiday weekends or that would give the water board's secretary or whoever's drafting the minutes ample time to get them drafted and get them sent to the public, to the newspaper within that time frame. So, And of course, there's the free option or the cheap option of posting them on a website.
So I'll talk about the next bill really quickly. If you'll remember back in the previous session, so in the 2021 session, there was a bill that dealt with notification to water boards on small subsurface drainage projects. So right now, if you have a project over 80 acres, there is a permitting process that you go through with the water board. But those smaller projects under 80 acres, there was no requirement. A bill was put in the 21 session to add a notification requirement for those small projects with some exceptions. And that bill passed with a sunset clause. So that requirement was no longer in effect starting January 1st of this year. And that gave the legislature an opportunity to look at that requirement and see if that's something they wanted to extend. They did extend that requirement through House Bill 1239. So that requirement is now in law until the legislature decides to look at it again. There was no sunset put back on it. So if you do have projects in your area that are under those 80 acres, that notification requirement is still in effect. And so you will still be getting some calls from folks who are working on those smaller projects.
Last one here. It's been a few months since I have looked at this one, so I try to go off of my memory here. But the House Bill 1076 was, I think, proposed by, correct me if I'm wrong, the department as one of the reduction of red tape initiatives. And I think the change here is to change the threshold for permitting from a volumetric basis to more of I guess, a simpler math basis, so that it doesn't have to be done by like a professional engineer, is my understanding. So I guess that's, wanted to mention that one, but. So I guess I'll just mention the interim activities. Until the next session, we've talked about forming a working group with the department and some of the Water Resource District folks to, I guess, try to hash out through some of these issues that we just discussed prior to the next session. We'll be, of course, monitoring our associations. Will be monitoring the water topics interim committee. And then there are some water issues that will also be discussed in the taxation and the ag committee. So I guess with that, I believe that's the last slide I have. Are there any questions before we move on to the next speaker?